Welcome to Virtual History Tours, your guide to people, places, and events that have shaped the world we live in. You've accessed Understanding the Constitution, the legislative branch. Your tour will begin in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome. I'm Allison, your tour guide, and I'm going to take you on a video tour of Congress, the legislative or lawmaking branch of our federal government. What better place to begin our tour than in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital? So let's get going. This is the Capitol building, the home of Congress, and the place where our country's laws are made. Before we go inside and look around, we'd better talk about how Congress and the whole federal government came to be. For that, we have to travel back in time to 1787. Hold on, here we go. This is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It's called that because this is where, in 1776, the leaders of the 13 colonies declared their independence from Great Britain and King George III. It is also the place where the leaders of the 13 states came in 1787 to write a constitution for the new country. What's a constitution? A constitution is a framework or an outline for a government. The people who came here in 1787 didn't actually plan to write a new constitution. They only wanted to revise the one that was already in place. It was called the Articles of Confederation. A confederation is a very loose association of strong, independent parts. Under the Articles of Confederation, the states, the parts, had most of the power. The central government had very little. But that government wasn't working very well. Why? Well, let's hear what two important leaders of the time have to say. First, James Madison of Virginia.
This government cannot succeed because the Articles of Confederation lack the great principles of a political system. It's merely a treaty of friendship between the various states.
Now let's see what Alexander Hamilton of New York has to say.
The fundamental deficiency with this government is that Congress has no power. Congress must have powers to deal with national problems. And there is no central court system, so when various states have a dispute, there is no place for them to go to work out their differences. The third deficiency, and it is a great one, is that there is no central leader, no chief executive the people can point to as the head of government.
So, a convention was called to meet in Philadelphia in May of 1787 to revise the Articles and make them stronger. Remember, Alexander Hamilton said that the reason the Articles were so weak was that there was no Congress with any power, no national court system, and no central leader? Well, a plan was presented to the convention to deal with those issues. Governor Edmund Randolph of Virginia made the presentation, but it was really the work of James Madison. It was called the Virginia Plan.
The Virginia Plan called for the government to be divided into 3 departments or branches. The legislative branch, which would enact the laws, the executive branch, which would see that the laws were carried out, and the judicial branch, which would see that justice was done under the law.
Madison's idea took hold. After some debate, a resolution was passed.
A national government ought to be established consisting of a supreme legislative, executive, and judiciary.
The delegates had taken a bold step. Now, instead of just revising the Articles, they would create a new Constitution. Many people contributed to the writing of the Constitution, but no one was more important than James Madison. His contribution was so great that he is known as the father of the Constitution. Why did Madison think it was so important to divide or separate the powers of government into 3 branches?
The separation of powers was very important. We had to guard against the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, in the hands of one person, or a few people, or even a group. It doesn't matter if the powerful are elected, self-appointed, or born to their office. If the powers aren't separated, the result is tyranny.
Once it was decided that the government would be made up of 3 separate branches, the delegates went on to work out the details of the Constitution. There were many issues to be decided. One of the most important and difficult issues was the makeup of the legislative branch, Congress. The problem was that the small states were afraid they would be overpowered by the large states. They wanted all states to be equal and have the same number of votes in Congress. The large states said they should have more votes because they had more people. The Virginia plan called for 2 houses. In both houses, representation would be based on population. So a large state like Virginia would have many more votes than a small state like Delaware. William Paterson of New Jersey offered another plan. The New Jersey plan. It called for a Congress of only 1 house. Each state would send the same number of representatives to it, no matter what the population. The convention debated and debated the issue. Some of the delegates even threatened to leave Philadelphia. Then came a compromise. In fact, it was called the Great Compromise. It was offered by Roger Sherman of Connecticut.
It was clear that the entire convention might break up over the disagreements between the large states and the smaller states. So Roger Sherman offered this compromise, that the Congress, the legislative branch, be made up of 2 houses. Representation in one house would be based on population, so the people would have a greater representation. In the other house, every state would have the same number of representatives, so the small states would have an equal voice to the large states.
That settled that issue. But there was another question that divided the convention. How would the representatives to Congress be selected?
The Great Compromise also addressed the issue of who would elect the members of Congress. Now, some of the delegates wanted the people to elect their representatives. Others thought it was best left to the state governments. Roger Sherman proposed this compromise. Have the people elect the members of the House of Representatives directly, and have the state governments select the senators.
Roger Sherman's compromise was accepted. So when the Constitution was sent to the state to be approved or ratified, this is how the legislative branch looked. The Congress would be made up of 2 houses. The House of Representatives, where the number of representatives would be based on the state's population, and the Senate, where each state would have the same number of senators, 2. The people would elect the members of the House of Representatives directly, and the state governments would select the senators. Of course, that's not exactly the system we have today. Now senators, just like representatives, are elected directly by the people. So let's go back to Washington and take a closer look at Congress today. Congress meets every year, and each Congress is given a number. The first Congress met in New York City in 1789. Since 1800, Congress has met here in Washington, D.C. Each House of Congress has its own special chamber. In 1910, Congress voted to limit the House of Representatives to 435 members, and that's how many representatives there are today. Each member of the House represents a congressional district. As we said, the greater the population of a state, the more representatives it has. What does it take to be elected to the House? According to the Constitution, there are only 3 qualifications. You have to be at least 25 years old, have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and you have to live in the state you represent. That's it. Once elected, a representative serves a term of 2 years and can be re-elected as many times as the voters want. Let's check out the Senate. This is where the Senate meets. As we know, there are 2 senators for each state, so the membership of the Senate is 100. To be a senator, you have to be at least 30 years old, have been a citizen of the United States for 9 years, and live in the state you represent. Senators are elected to terms of 6 years and also can be re-elected as many times as the voters choose. Even though the Constitution doesn't mention political parties, it would be almost impossible to talk about Congress without talking about politics. A political party is a group of people who have similar ideas about government. Today, there are 2 major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. The parties play a very important role in how Congress works. The Constitution calls for the House of Representatives to select a chief officer called the Speaker of the House. The Speaker is chosen by whatever party has a majority in the House. So, if the Republicans have a majority, then they elect the Speaker. The same happens if the Democrats have a majority. Political parties play an important role in the Senate, too. The official chief officer of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States. But he can only vote to break a tie. The person who's really in charge is called the Majority Leader. The Majority Leader is elected by whatever party holds the majority in the Senate. Section 1 of Article 1 of the Constitution says that Congress shall have all the legislative powers of the government. That means that Congress makes the country's laws. So now, let's look at how our laws are made. When a law is first proposed, it's called a bill. Anyone can propose a bill. You, me, a member of Congress, the President, anyone. Then the bill has to be presented or introduced into Congress. For this example, let's say our bill is being presented in the House by Representative Jones. The bill is given to the clerk of the House, who assigns it a number and sends it to be printed. Then, the Speaker of the House sends the bill to a committee to be examined. The committee discusses the bill, holds hearings, gets information, and makes recommendations. Sometimes the committee even rewrites the bill. Then the committee votes to either approve the bill or reject it. If the committee votes to approve, the bill is presented to the whole House. Then all the representatives debate the bill and vote on it. From there, the bill is sent to the Senate. The Senate goes through the same procedure. It goes to a committee, and then the whole Senate votes. Once Congress approves the finished bill, it's sent to the President. One of the most important features written into the Constitution is a system called checks and balances. Checks and balances means that each branch of the government, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, has some power over the other branches. That way, no one branch can become too powerful, and no branch can work without the approval and cooperation of the others. Here's how checks and balances works in the process of making laws. Congress, as we just saw, votes on all bills. After both the House and Senate approve a bill, that means that a majority vote in favor of it, it's sent to the President. If the President agrees with the bill, he signs it, the bill becomes a law. But if the President doesn't approve the bill, he can veto it. That means that the bill won't become a law. So the President has a check over the legislature. But it doesn't stop there. Congress also has a check on the President. The Congress can vote on the bill again and pass it over the president's veto. In order to do that, this time, each House has to get 2/3 of its members to vote yes. That means 290 votes in the House and 67 votes in the Senate. And that's not easy to do, but if the members of Congress feel strongly enough, it can happen. Congress has other checks on the president. One of the most powerful checks is impeachment. Impeachment means that Congress can remove the president from office. Each House of Congress plays a different role in the impeachment process. The House brings charges against the president, and the Senate acts as a court. Congress has the same check over the judicial branch because it has the power to impeach federal judges, too. The Senate has some special powers and duties that act as a check on the president. The Senate has to approve all appointments the president makes for federal judges and other offices like cabinet officers and ambassadors. The Senate also has to approve any treaties the president makes with foreign countries. Other duties both houses of Congress have are the power to collect taxes and print money, establish post offices and courts, and declare war. So what do you think it would be like to serve in Congress? To answer that question, we spoke to Representative John Larson, who told us what a typical day is like.
In the morning, we start off with committee meetings and various hearings that we'll have. Sometimes there's a press conference, but there's an awful lot of people that come and visit us with various concerns, people that are advocates for a particular cause, whether it be the pharmaceutical industry or teachers or firefighters or veterans. We see all of them in Washington, and we have to keep a schedule of appointments to make sure that that happens. And then usually we have a roll call vote when we arrive in Congress. We go to the chamber to vote. We vote electronically. Everyone is issued a card, and with that specific card, it has your picture ID on it. You insert that into an electronic slot, and you push yay, nay, or present. You make sure that you're out there listening to the concerns of the people that have sent you to Washington to represent them on their behalf. It also means educating the public. And so we will hold forums in the district so that it will provide an opportunity for citizens to come and learn more about how their government operates and functions. And without people taking direct concern and involvement about their government and not only who represents them, but expressing their view. You don't have to be a member of Congress or a member of a state legislature or serve on a town council or a board of education to be directly involved in government. All it takes is a commitment on the part of a citizen to make sure that its nation is doing the very best that it can to preserve forever our great and treasured democracy.
That concludes our virtual tour of the legislative branch of our federal government. We hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.